Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, EIM Greenhouse Gas Enhancements. Please note all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portions of the call. We will provide you with instructions on how to ask verbal questions at these times. You are welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To submit a written question, use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen and choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu. If you require technical assistance, send a note to the event producer or call our help desk at 888-796-6118. With that, I will turn the call over to Craig Williams, trainer. Craig, please go ahead.
Thank you, Lauren. We appreciate your help. Welcome to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. I do want to remind everyone that this call and the training will be recorded. So when you do ask your questions, we ask that you state your name and your affiliation. You'll be reminded of that. But also so that we can use this as a reference, it will be posted online, the recording, and you'll be able to pull that up, or people that couldn't make this session, you can forward and let them pay attention. We don't anticipate this will be a long session, so I'll go through the slides. I won't spend too much time on each one of them. The concepts are fairly straightforward. And then we'll open it up for questions to make sure we address any of those concerns, or if you don't understand a concept, we'll review that. So just a little background information. Most of you are aware that California has the California Air Resources Board, and energy generated in California or imported into the state to serve California load is subject to California's greenhouse gas regulations that have been adopted by the Air Resources Board. Part of the challenge is to create mechanisms that accurately reflect those greenhouse gas compliance costs to address those regulations, and those have evolved since the start of EIM markets. Over the last year and a half, we have been actively working with the ARB and stakeholders to address those concerns with minimum bid prices and secondary dispatch. Based on the stakeholder feedback, we made a determination to eliminate the minimum bid price considerations from this proposal, and the ISO is going to continue to ensure that the ISO's greenhouse gas design provides full cost recovery of all of the ARB compliance costs for the first deliverers of electricity to the ISO, as identified by the EIM optimization. And then finally, day-ahead greenhouse gas design will be discussed further in the future as we have the EIM entities day-ahead extension stakeholder initiative. It may be addressed in other forms as well as those evolve and develop. So here is the revised proposal. As I mentioned, it's fairly straightforward. The revised proposal limits the greenhouse gas bid quantity of a participating resource to the megawatt value between the EIM participating resource's base schedule and the resource's upper economic level. So if you look at this example, we have a resource with a base schedule of 70 megawatts. Its upper economic level, which is the level to which it has bids available for us to dispatch, is 85 megawatts. In this case, I just randomly said the unit's maximum might be 100. Now, in the previous participating resource, if that unit was dispatched to 85 megawatts in real time, we would assign a potential that all 85 megawatts could be assigned to dispatch into California. But under the revised proposal, you can see that the greenhouse gas bid quantity is now simply going to be limited to the upper economic level that you were dispatched to in real time, minus the base schedule that you submitted for your own sufficiency purposes. So under the revised schedule, it would be 15 megawatts available to be considered imported into California rather than the full 85. So this proposal does reduce secondary dispatches, but it doesn't completely eliminate them. Under the current EIM rules, a resource could submit a greenhouse gas bid quantity of 85 megawatts, and all 85 could be attributed as serving ISO's load. Under the revised proposal, again, that's reduced to 15 megawatts. And if it was dispatched to its full upper economic level to 85 megawatts, we could attribute that 15 to serving ISO load. Now, since the resource increased 15 megawatts from its base schedule, no secondary dispatch is associated with that 15 megawatts. In this case, the potential secondary dispatch effect would be 0 megawatts. The bid quantity less the amount of the quantity that is allocated to the resource's base schedule. 15 minus 15 is 0. Slightly different, if the resource had only been dispatched 10 megawatts from its base schedule to 80 megawatts, no secondary dispatch would be associated with that 10 megawatts. In this case, the potential secondary dispatch effect would be 5 megawatts. The resource's bid quantity less the amount of that quantity that is allocated to the base schedule. And then really that's all we have on this. That's the extent of the proposal at this point. So we will go ahead and open it up to questions at this time. Lauren, can we open it up to questions?
Yes. If you would like to ask a question, please dial #2 on your phone to be entered into the question queue. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name and question. Again, #2 if you would like to enter the question queue. We do have a caller. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is Gong Wen with Puget Sound Energy. The question I have is that it's just related back to the number you said earlier. So the new market design is not going to eliminate completely the secondary dispatch. So what are the tools that the ISOs are thinking about that can solve that issue?
So that issue is going to be resolved by the California Air Resources Board. We don't have the ability to resolve that through the market. Some of the previous iterations of this proposal, we tried to address fully, but those had either price inconsistency issues with regards to price formation, and they also had some adverse bidding incentives. So that remaining accounting for the greenhouse gas emissions will be addressed by CARB through their regulatory process.
I see. So it would be addressed somehow outside of the market system optimization.
That's correct.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. And the other question I have is for non-emitting resources. I just want to confirm that when this design is effective in November, like hydro and wind, we cannot submit a non-zero cost adder for the GHG. Is that a correct understanding?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. And from our market interface, are we able to see the price gap for each of the resources?
You have the ability to calculate that by looking at the top of your bid curve minus your base schedule. So you personally have all the information necessary to calculate that quantity.
Oh, I'm just okay. So my question is really on the price. Is there any price cap?
So there's not a price cap, but for each resource we calculate based upon its worst emissions profile a daily maximum bid price that it can submit, and then all resources are paid the marginal clearing price for greenhouse gas.
All right. Thank you.
Can you go back?
Which slide would you like us to go back to? Hello?
Caller, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think this is a different caller. I don't know who asked for the slide to go back. Was there someone else that buzzed in before me? I heard someone else asking a question, so I don't know if we somehow were both unmuted at the same time.
Why don't you go ahead?
I'll go ahead. This is Meredith Alexander from SMUD, and I just wanted to confirm my understanding that this adjustment of dispatch quantity only applies to EIM participating resources outside of California.
That is correct.
Correct? Okay. Sorry, it just didn't say
Correct.
it on your slide. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
So was there another caller who was trying to come in?
Hi, this is Amy Burton calling from PSE. So can you go back to slide 7, I think it was? Where it talked about, yeah, this is one. So you said that that last increment, that 5 megawatts, could be subject to secondary dispatch. But if I guess I'm not clear if that's not being dispatched, under the EIM, then how does that 5 megawatts fit in? If we're only being increased to 80, not the 85.
So I think the point that this slide is trying to show is that while you were dispatched to 80 and attributed for serving California load of 15, that 5 of that is associated with the base schedule you submitted of 70.
Okay.
And so the fact that it's attributing to the base schedule means that there was some other resource in the energy imbalance market that was incrementally dispatched for the 5 megawatts that was attributed to the base. And that may or may not have emissions associated with it. So for example, if this was a hydro resource and the resource that was incremented was a hydro resource, there's no change in emissions. If the resource that was the backfilled the hydro resource was a gas emitting resource, then there are emissions that ARB will look to account for through their regulations.
Okay. Thank you.
We have another caller in queue.
Go ahead.
Caller, your line has been opened.
Make sure you're not talking into your mute button.
Thank you. Sorry about that. This is Meredith from SMUD again, and I actually did want to add on to the previous caller's question. I understand that it's not CAISO who's going to be doing the calculations of secondary dispatch, but that is CARB's role. Is it your expectation that they will adopt part of your methodology that you're presenting here on slide 7 as part of their future methodology for estimating the total quantity of secondary dispatch? I mean, this looks very rational to me on slide 7, but have there been conversations or has there been an indication that they're going to start from this point and build on it in their next round of rulemaking?
So we have had conversations with ARB. I think there is agreement that in this example, that 5 megawatts is the quantity of the potential secondary dispatch. I think there is ongoing discussions through their rulemaking in terms of how you would calculate the emissions associated with that 5 megawatts.
Okay, but in terms of how the secondary dispatch effect is calculated, you think there's agreement at this point between CAISO
I think there's agreement on the 5 megawatts.
Okay.
There's agreement on the 5 megawatts. I think there is discussion around, do you use, for instance, the default emission or the unspecified source rate for the emissions associated with that 5 megawatts, or do you do something more complicated like trying to determine which resource actually was dispatched to fill it, to backfill?
Okay.
But there's a trade-off there between, information that ARB has to where they can calculate the rate themselves, and then information that they would need to get from us to be able to calculate a different rate. So again, I think it's been ARB's working that through their process, and we're committed to working with ARB to help them address this in whatever measure they think is appropriate.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very welcome. Thank you.
We do have a question that came in through the notes. What do you mean non-GHG emitting resources must bid non-zero GHG component? Did I get that incorrect?
So a non-emitting resource, what we would do is we calculate a daily maximum GHG cost where we take the emissions of the resource times the index price for compliance instruments. Well, since this is zero emitting resource, 0 times that rate equals 0. And so the maximum bid price, since it has to be cost-based based on FERC compliance, that bid price has to be cost-based. For hydro, wind, solar, the bid price is 0. Because they don't have any compliance obligation if they're attributed to California.
All right, and we do have another caller in the verbal queue. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is James Reschke, Indy Energy. In your example B, I'm trying to get a better understanding of how this is. I mean, first you state that there was 10 megawatts, and then you said no secondary dispatch would be associated with that 10 megawatts. Now, on the other end, you have 5 megawatts, but in this example, is the 15 megawatts, is that actually part what's being imported into California, and you're going to get that GHG credit on your settlement statement?
Yes, so in this example, you're attributed 15 megawatts from a greenhouse gas award standpoint.
Okay, now, second part is that 5 megawatts. Okay, so so CARB's going to put the onus on whoever, on that 15 megawatts that was credited to the, so if this is my settlement statement, I would have to report that 15 megawatts to CARB.
Yep.
All right. Now, one more question in this down the line. Is there any way that the ISO has arranged with CARB to do any independent reporting on this? Because right now it seems like CARB wants to use tagging data, and sometimes that doesn't sync up with what was actually credited to the GHG.
They're not using tag information for EIM participating resources compliance obligation determination. They're using that GHG award. Now for imports outside the EIM, they do use tag data.
Right. Well, that's okay. That's for I guess a later discussion, because they're trying to independently verify it, and the tag data they got promoted this time around didn't match what actually flowed or what we were accounted for. So that's for a further discussion down the line. Thanks.
Thank you. So just kind of based on the discussions that I've heard from the last couple questions, let me just take a moment and go back to our example. So we have a base schedule of 70 megawatts, and then in real time the unit's given a dispatch operating target of 85 megawatts. So when we would attribute that revised, only that 15 megawatts could be attributed to possibly entering into California. Now, when you get to example B, what we're saying is it was still given a dispatch operating target of 15 megawatts to go up in real time for a total of 85, but they only went up to 80. They didn't provide that other 5. So the market had to find that other 5 megawatts from another resource. And so that's what sets the example for this. That 5 megawatts has to be accounted for somehow. So if you missed that, that's how that's being read. This doesn't say it was being dispatched, just an additional 10 instead of the 15. Hopefully that helps. Additional questions?
Yes, we do have another caller in the queue. Please go ahead. Caller, are you muted?
Yes, this is Katie Zambrini from Shell Energy. Going back to that example A, this question may have already been asked, but how do we know that all 15 megawatts are entering CAISO and that they're not serving load outside of CAISO?
So there isn't some tracking of electrons that's going on here. The reason we know is that the market optimization doing a least cost dispatch has identified that that 15 megawatts is serving to support a transfer into the ISO. So it's a result of the market optimization, not tracking where the electrons flow.
So can we assume that anytime we see these increases that they are, anytime that this will show up on this greenhouse gas report, that's always serving CAISO load?
Or a SMUD load when SMUD joins the EIM. So any balancing authority area inside California.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, we do not have any further questions.
Well, thank you for joining us, then. We appreciate all of the questions and your participation here today. We had a good number of people. Again, this presentation is recorded and will be posted, so if you'd like to refer to it at a later date or forward it to your colleagues, it usually takes about a day or two for that to happen.
About 3 days.
About 3 days, sorry about that. But the presentation of the PowerPoint is posted already at our Learning Center. So if you go to the caliso.com and go to our participation page and then look for the Learning Center, it is posted there already. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you all for joining today's call. This event has concluded. You may disconnect.